Hey everyone, welcome to Pop XP. And before the show starts, make sure to click that subscribe button and click the bell to get notifications when we go live and we upload awesome new content. And don't forget, if you can, make sure to share our stream on all your social media outlets. We appreciate it, and thanks for helping us grow the Pop XP channel.
Hey, what's up, everybody? We're back. The Steve and Cimino Says Boom Show on the Pop XP. I'm your host, John Cimino, with my co-host here, Steve Says.
Boom!
And down below, our technical wizard, the wizard from the Frightful Four, in this case, the Frightful Three, Jack Kirby co-created, Niall Scala. How you doing, brother?
I'm doing well, man. The brain of the mainframe's in the house, ready for a great show with you fine gentlemen.
Yeah, and unfortunately, today is going to be a little bit more of a somber tone because, as we know, and we did on issue 18, we did a little dedication to Neil Adams. And in this case, issue 20, we're doing a dedication to another great, true royal legend, George Perez. What do we say about that, Steve?
You know, it's an awful thing that the subject that we're dealing with, but it's going to give us a chance to allow people to hear some great stuff about George and celebrate George for everything he did.
Yeah, he was, first off, let's be honest, and everybody that has known George, he is such a nice guy. I remember meeting him back, oh, Niall, remember Comic Con? Remember that one?
Yes.
Remember, it was during around that time,
Yep.
and I remember him being there. It was before, yeah, it was Comic Con before it became Terrificon,
Yep.
and we,
in Bridgeport, I think they had
yeah,
yeah.
he was there, and I remember that he was losing weight. Like I remember, like he was always a little bit more husky, but this was when it was. Now this is about God. It was about maybe almost 9 years ago, right, Niall? If I'm correct, if that.
Correct.
Okay, but he was already. There was rumors about. I was hearing that he was having like cancer, and like I heard that, and I could tell he was starting to lose weight, but he was losing weight. He wasn't. It wasn't a degenerative thing yet. But I remember him losing weight. And I remember seeing him early in the morning and talking to him and stuff. And, he was so nice. He had his cup of coffee and stuff. But I just remember just such a pleasant man. And he was so one of the people. And that was great to see. That was my first impression of meeting the man face to face. What about you, Steve?
Okay, I go back a little bit further than that. I was very fortunate, and it's growing more and more fortunate as the years have gone by. I went to a store in California. They had a signing, and it was a Teen Titans themed signing, Marv Wolfman and George Perez, 1994.
Wow.
And a select group of us, like 10, were invited to go back and have dinner at the Claim Jumper afterwards. And I got to witness the magnificence of the man. His interactions with all of these fans. And believe you me, as soon as he got to the store, he was at the store by about 4 p.m. He was badgered by thousands of questions. Who did what? Why that? He was smiling and laughing and telling some inner details. Our dinner did not finish until 11 o'clock at night. So
Wow.
I was there and I just saw him talking, enjoying, and then getting more nerdy than the super nerds. He was correcting people and saying, oh, no, let me explain to you. Me and Marv, we worked this out. And you notice his powers, they couldn't bend around the corner. So I was just in awe of his knowledge and his commitment, but also such a gregarious man at the time. At the time, he was a little bit more heavy set.
Yeah.
And he ordered the ore cart, which is a huge meal. If you ever go to the Claim Jumper, I want you to order the ore cart in honor of George Perez.
It sounds like a ship Thanos would be flying.
I don't know whether they still do it, but it was massive. And he was laughing. And also, such a flirt. We had a rather pretty waitress. And every time she came to the table, he had this big smile. And it was like, hey, la, la, la. And I remember even at that time thinking to myself, wow, I'm here at the Claim Jumper with Marv Wolfman and George Perez. Now, at that time, and we can get into this later on with Marv, Marv was not having a good time. No, really. Marv was having some personal problems at that time. Okay. And Marv was very sort of grumpy. Okay. When we have Marv, I'm going to remind him of that one.
Okay.
But it was all left to George Perez. And they had these other 9 people just badgering him. And I remember right at the end of the night, we got driven back to the store where, the car was parked. And it was like it was almost 12 o'clock at night and people were still asking questions. And he was standing in front of the doorway answering these questions at 12 o'clock at night.
Wow.
And you're right. I have never, ever heard a bad word said about George Perez. Never a moment of shouting, screaming, crazy ego, nothing. Just a gem of a man, a beautiful man. And that's my first memory of George Perez.
And he went out like that. If you looked at his last pictures, what they were putting up, him at Disneyland and all that stuff, he still had a smile. You could tell he was sickly, but he was still smiling, and he still had that little George Perez little spunk to him. And I noticed that they went to the DC offices, and Marv and him went there, and they were all embracing them. So it was good. What do you think, Niall? What about George?
Man, I have to tell you, the first time I actually got to talk to him was Terrificon 2019 because my table was right near him. And so I had to go over, right? Infinity Gauntlet, everything going on. And I was chatting with him. There was a line and someone, how they have people working with him. And, I'm talking to him. He's like, oh, he's in line. And the guy's like, no, he can stay. He's like, he's my friend. We're chatting. So, he's greeting fans, doing covers and whatnot. And I'm sitting there talking to him. And I mean, what a heck of a nice guy. And, from working with Billy, we know him as Uncle George. That's what they referred to him as. He had a great relationship. And to be honest, I actually have a little bit of an honor that I got to work on the last cover he ever did, which was for She Return of the Warrior. The George Perez cover is the last cover he did before he officially quit or retired. I mean, so I got to work with him in essence.
Wow.
Which was great. But yeah, I mean, he is just, you're right. I've never heard a bad thing about him. I've only heard amazing things. And when I got to meet him at Terrificon, and I was talking for about a half hour, plus he'd come over to our table and chat a little bit. And I mean, what a fantastic soul. I mean, just I see that image that Bill Sienkiewicz goes, this is George I always see. And you see the big hands out and the hearts flying everywhere. The man was it was love,
Yeah, he appreciated where he was and what he was doing. And as you were saying, Steve, I'm a Latino. He's a Latino. We like the women. It's a curse. I'm sorry, it's a curse. Believe me, I know.
That's a curse for men, man.
No, yeah, but the thing with Latinos is we can't help it. I mean, it'll cost we know. So you guys might think about that. You guys might think maybe I can't go that way because it's going to cost me money. Latinos, we don't think. We just go, and then we get thrown in jail, and it costs us $40,000. We'll talk about it tomorrow. But yeah, but Perez was that, and I know he loved he loved to draw his women. And now coming to the artist talent of the man, watching these creators, and Perez was one of them. Their art is so ingrained in your head that when you're looking at them and they're just doing a sketch, you see your whole life because you're seeing that drawing this man drawing in the style that you know in all these other things. That's what when I first started going to conventions and the first guy I saw draw, and then it came to me like, oh my God, that guy is putting pad to paper, was Herb Trimpe way back when. And when I saw him drawing on a piece of paper, I was like, he's drawing my whole life. Those just his skill, like his drawings was everything I represented my life. And Perez was one of those guys. I remember him drawing Wonder Woman, and you're just looking at that, and it's just like, oh my God, I know that style, and it's him. So it's just crazy. So let's talk about some of the comics and some of the drawings and some of the storylines that we loved. I just want to throw out there the first issue because I saw an article about just the other day. They were throwing up the best George Perez stories, and the ones I always saw was Crisis on Infinite Earth and then Fantastic Four 176. Now, what I want to throw a little background. First off, Roy Thomas wrote this issue incredibly, and then George Perez drew it. The cover is obviously done by Jack Kirby, but this, people should know, back in the day in 1976, that was Story of the Year, and George Perez was Artist of the Year for that. He was voted Artist of the Year. Roy came in second for Writer of the Year. He lost by 1 vote to Denny O'Neil. So he was right there on the edge. But that story, and that's a timeless story that you can read today. And there's so much fun, so much private jokes between the creators, like when they had the editor-in-chiefs on the wall, and when Roy was going to come back, and then they exit. Oh, it's great. And then Roy saves Stan Lee's life by the Impossible Man the shield gets thrown, and Roy takes him down and oh, awesome. What do you have to say about that issue, Steve? Come on.
It's funny that you pull that issue out. I always loved that issue. I know that the Impossible Man had not appeared since FF11, if I'm correct. It was the longest time ever, because I think that Stan Lee ended up not liking that character at all, and they just like completely let that one go. And this is the genius of Roy Thomas. Roy, he will find this stuff and he'll bring it out. But what's so good about that issue in regards to George is that his art has transformed. Right there, his art is more fleshed out. It's more dynamic and very clean and clear. And there's a lot of pages in there with a lot of little panels. And that was going to become his lifeblood, his staple. That was going to be a Pereziism, okay? And that issue is just full of it. And what's so funny to me is when I was thinking about what we were going to talk about for this episode, I went back, and my first issue that I saw George Perez on the Fantastic Four was a couple of issues before that, of course. I'm talking about issue 164, okay? 164 features the return of Marvel Boy as the Crusader, okay? Oh. And George Perez does a fantastic job. If Roy was here, I would be slathering over Roy's work bringing back Marvel Boy from the 1950s as well. Mm-hmm. There's a beautiful, in that storyline, there's a beautiful flashback sequence where you see young Marvel Boy being taken to Uranus, and it's all done beautifully. There's so many great scenes. The Crusader is totally insane, and George is showcasing such intricate art. Now, remember, he is listed on that issue as guest artist, okay? Because at that time, Rick Buckler was still basically the Fantastic Four penciler.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So when you look at the splash page, it says guest penciler, George Perez. And so he does 164, 165. And there's another sequence in there, and it was really funny. Many, many, many years ago, me and my friend, my best friend at the time, there's a sequence where the Human Torch is falling miles away, right? And they're in a building, and Reed is going to have to stretch. and you see him like boom, the Thing is holding his legs, and he's stretching and stretching and stretching. And George Perez, you can see, he does these like 4 panels in a row where Reed is just like he's pushing himself, and he says, it's been years since I've gone this far. And then he finally gets there, you know. Just those little sequences. I remember me and my buddy were talking about like, look how far he's stretching. We were trying to estimate how far it was. You know, was it 800 meters? Was it 1,000 meters? How far did he stretch? So
and Steve, let me point out, it wasn't just the first appearance of Crusader. It was also the first time Roy created the quantum bands. Those were the first time the quantum bands came to the Marvel universe.
Oh, believe me, we could go on a tangent for 12 hours. John, don't do that to me. Don't do that. We can go on.
Another Roy Thomas.
Believe me, the next time we have Roy, he's going to be sitting there for 16 hours as I just keep talking.
So good. I'm tearing up right now. The quantum bands. How good is that name? I want to put them on. I wish they existed, and I want to fly to the sky.
Now, what's really good about that?
I'm crying. I love them.
Now, if you remember correctly, John, he's having the Crusader's having a hard time trying to beat the Fantastic Four. So he's trying to draw more and more power because the quantum bands are drawing power from the sun. And he turns up the levels up to the ultimate level. And there's a little sequence. George Perez draws his face where he realizes that he's going to die. And he's just got this look of horror, you know. And then he says, you know, Father, you know, whoosh. And it's just like this massive explosion. Beautiful George Perez doing his best Kirby homage to the little Kirby crackle.
Yeah.
And or you see the bands which get handed over to Reed, and then Reed hands them over to S.H.I.E.L.D., and then you see the next in Captain America 217, for those of you who are super nerdy. So after seeing that, I realized, okay, this George's style of art is different. It's not Neil Adamsy. It's not John Buscema. It's not Jack Kirby. It's like hyper-focused, like a magnifying glass, and then it's just like whoop, tight lines, very tight, small, loads of little panels, a lot of extra work. And when he would do like the version of Kirby Crackle or an explosion, I was thinking, did he spend all night drawing all those little tiny bubbles or things? And even then, I was like, wow, this is different. He's coming into this industry. He's young, of course, at this time. He's coming into this industry. And he's setting a bar. He's basically setting a bar. He's like, you know what? I can imagine him with that page in front, and he's thinking, all right, I've been on this page for 8 hours, but you know what? I think I can do a little bit more Kirby Crackle. And he adds, I just imagine him being that dedicated.
Yeah, and that's where you see his enthusiasm. You know he's loving where he is. He's loving this crap, and he's loving the story. Like, he's in the right place at the right time, in the right state of mind. And you can see that because even as a kid, when I saw his art for the first time, I loved it. And I it's funny when we always talk about legends here and there, but when we talk about the true royal legends of this industry, the creme de la creme, Uncle George, right, Niall? Uncle George is what they call it. There's something about it. It's like the first time you see the Kirby stuff, you might not like it, but there's something about it that you gravitate to. I swear, George Perez, the same thing. I just gravitated to it, and it's like, I want to see more of this. I like this. It was just so I agree. And oh my God, it's just he's a legend, man. I mean, yeah. Oh God,
it's an iconic style, man. You know, it's funny because I look at artists, right? I'm like, this is a Frazetta class artist, right? Or a Kirby class artist, or a Perez class artist, and I look at Perez, and it's like he did what Jack Kirby did. Like, he had a style that was just so unbelievable, so eye-catching, that so many other artists out there doing comics were trying to recreate that style to kind of keep that momentum. And the same thing happened with George, right? I mean, look at the Bronze Age of comics. I mean, his style really influenced a lot of other artists going through, where you were like, that's a George Perez book. And sometimes you'd be like,
wait, oh, that's not George Perez, because his style was so iconic, like you were saying, Steve. The lines were tight, the panels were smaller, but they were so impactful. I mean, what a director's eye when he was
Oh,
laying out his pages, unbelievable. And
crazy.
the detail, because Kirby's it's a more simplistic style, right? Some even say it's like a superhero cartoonish style to it, because it's so simplistic in lines and flats and colors. Where you take George's, where he takes that and he actually brings them more alive, right? The anatomy's more Roman godlike, right? With the details into the muscles and everything. He really impacted and influenced, so
but
many
it's still
creators.
but it's still like a comic drawing.
Yes,
It's like
yes,
that's the difference is he has all that, but it's like comic art. You know what I
yes.
mean? It's not like
But it's kick-ass comic art.
yes, yes, but it's like
It's
perfect
kick-ass.
comic art. Now,
Yes.
Steve, let's go to an issue that you were talking about that you're going to talk about. But the first time I ever saw a George Perez's art, and I didn't even know it in the barber shop. You brought this, and you're going to talk about it. Issue 188, correct?
Yes,
Now,
indeed.
let me just say really quick. I remember sitting on the barber's chair. I'm about, I don't know, 6, 7. And I remember they had a stack of comics, like, what you're supposed to read when you're waiting there. And
Yeah.
I looked and I was like, are they fighting a building? Is that like, my little mind couldn't do it, but I was looking at, but the power of those comics, the electricity of those comics was all right there. And that's the first comic I ever saw of the Fantastic Four, because I remember the cartoons, with Herbie the robot and the thing rings, that's, the Saturday morning cartoons. Little by little, it was such a discovery, and I'm like, what is that? So, Steve, tell us about 188. What's the big deal?
I don't know how this keeps happening. I didn't know that about you in the Fantastic Four, because I'm going to blow your mind right now. Episode 1 of our series, I talked about going over to my friend's house, and then they said the lights were going to turn off, the TV had to come off, you had to go to bed. And I was like, oh, we're going to have to go to bed. And he looked at me and goes, oh no, we don't have to go to sleep. He goes, take a look what I have. And he pulled out this massive case from under his bed, full of English reprint comics, which reprinted all the Marvels. He was flicking through, and he just pulled this one issue out, and it's the cover to 188. And I was immediately mesmerized. And then I looked, and I was like, there's little people coming out of the building. The building's alive, but there's little people in there. And I was like, wait a minute, is the building breathing? Why is the building got smoke coming out? And I asked my friend, who was my guru, and I was like, is the building alive? How's this happening? And he goes, that's because of the Molecule Man. I'm like, well, come on, give me, I don't know who the Molecule Man is. What's going on here? So, yes, that was the first Fantastic Four cover that I ever saw. And the fact that that's the first, that doesn't mean, what's going on here, John? I don't understand.
If anybody knows, in a past episode, the first X-Men comic he ever got, 183, was the same first X-Men comic I ever got. And you got to remember, we're not across the street. We're not even across the cities or states. We're across continents. Continents when this is going on.
What? Did we just become best friends? Yep.
The fact
that both me and you, as youngsters, our eyes are looking all over this issue, and our brains are coming up with the same questions. And like, is that people in there? Is that building actually alive? And I realized, of course, at that time, there was this whole beautiful, imaginative world that I was just about to get into. And I had no idea. I never looked at that time. I didn't look at credits or anything like that. It wasn't until years later that I realized it was George Perez. So at that signing in 1994, and by the way, I was surrounded by what seemed like millions of Teen Titans fans. They bought stacks of Teen Titans. I bought 2 issues of Fantastic Four. I brought issue 188 and 196. 188, I put in front of him, And I was like, George, I said, look at the people in the buildings. And I remember the people who were organizing it were looking at me like, Steve, you brought this for him to
Yeah,
sign?
Steve, hold on. Not to cut you off, but while the barber is cutting my hair, I'm this little kid. I'm going like this, and the barber keeps turning my head because I was noticing that. I'm looking at that building guy, and I'm. So go ahead. I'm sorry.
I remember the guy that was organizing the signing looked at me and gave me the dirtiest look ever. It's like, what is that? What? And I said, no, this is very special to me. And I said, and by the way, I have that issue. It's signed. I didn't send it away to CGC. It's in my personal collection. And then the other issue that I had signed, which has a magnificent drawing of the Thing. It's issue 196. And on the cover, his girlfriend, Alicia Masters, is seeing him for the first time. She's like, I can see, and you're hideous. And he's got his hands like this with this like sad face. He's like, don't say that. And I remember looking at this cover for hours. I always loved it. And again, I put that book out there and I said, George, you're my second favorite artist to ever draw the Thing. I said, after Kirby. And he was just like, really? And I said, I'm being dead serious. And so that's why on that other picture that we have, which just showcases the Thing on a splash page, that one, that's where George Perez is beginning to fly. That's, of course, being inked by Kirby's inker, Joe Sinnott.
Oh, such a good inker for him.
That. Only Kirby can do the Thing better than George. I don't care what. I know John Byrne got close.
No.
But this
is better. For me, I agree.
Oh, and I remember when I looked at this, I was like, wow. Oh, my God. And so for me, when I was collecting my back issues and getting it together, I remember I got to a point when suddenly George was gone from Marvel. And I was like, I wonder where he went. Of course, at that time, I was unaware of, he went over to DC, to work with Marv Wolfman and to completely reinvigorate the teen superhero with the new Teen Titans. And many people may not understand this right now. Yes, look at that magnificent work. George's work at Marvel was only a warm-up for this.
And this was DC's. Yes, this was DC's answer to the X-Men that was going on.
Yes, and not only, did DC say, okay, we need an answer to this juggernaut, which is the X-Men.
Yep.
As far as I know, according to legend, some of the issues actually outsold the X-Men.
Yeah.
And while we were having that dinner at the Claim Jumper, someone asked him about that, and he sat back and he was having a drink, and he goes, yep. He goes, the new Teen Titans paid for my house. Yeah. And he carried on having a drink, and as I said, I'm not a huge DC fan, but I have graded many books in my time, for sales. And whenever I look on the inside, I'm always like, oh my word. I don't know if he was forced out of Marvel. Of course, we are going to find that out from when we have a podcast featuring Mr. Jim Shooter.
Yeah.
I did sort of ask him a little bit when I first met him. I was like, why did you let George Perez go? But then again, there's a whole host of DC fans out there right now who are saying, thank God he left because I got my Titans. Mm-hmm. So many people. They have tears pouring from their eyes when they're thinking of the Titans, which all leads up to DC's biggest story ever. Period. Okay? They've tried all sorts of things in recent years. Everyone in the comic business, fan, historian, dealer, whatever you are, Crisis on Infinite Earths is the biggest comic story ever done.
Mm-hmm.
Marv Wolfman, with the help of, Len Wein, they had to craft a story that was going to save the DC universe and bring it into the future with billions of characters and planets and scenarios out of anyone in the world. Right in their lap is the perfect artist to pull this off.
Oh yeah.
And
Steve, I just want to make sure people know that predated Secret Wars.
yes,
Correct.
it did.
Yes, it did.
Yes. Well,
when Secret Wars came out, it was just about done.
Secret Wars 2.
Yeah.
Secret Wars came out first.
Was it?
Yeah, Secret Wars comes out May 1984.
Oh, that I'm sorry. That is correct because everybody thought that that's what they were going to fight. A big thing it was said was they did that because I remember hearing Shooter saying they did that because Secret Wars was such a big deal.
Yes,
that's
however,
correct.
In recent years, we found out.
Yes, correct.
That Marv Wolfman and Len Wein had been working on this plan for quite a while, almost 2 years.
Yeah.
I can only imagine what they thought when they saw Secret Wars. They must have been like, "Oh God, really?" But Secret Wars, hey, I love Secret Wars, but Secret Wars was just a slam bang action. Crisis asked the creators and the artist to completely reinvigorate a dead universe, and we can all admit it here. Pre-Crisis DC was a mess. Marvel were crushing it. The only thing they had was Teen Titans. Okay, everything else useless. So stacked on their shoulders, Marv Wolfman and George Perez, is the weight of the entire DC universe at the time.
Yeah.
The entirety of fandom, all those interviews in Amazing Heroes and Comics Journal. Hey, that's going back in time for you guys, right? And George Perez, had to deal with that first issue where he apparently went to a comic shop and was in tears because of the printing quality of that first issue, which was done by the technique, I think it was called, was flexographic. And it wasn't good enough to pick up his fine lines. And he immediately called the head honchos at DC and said, "You got to fix this.
Yeah.
You've got to fix this. You're destroying my work." Okay. But, I've met people, DC fans, who, when they talk about Crisis, you can see the reverence in their eyes, in their spirit, the way that me and you, John, talk about certain Marvel stories. Crisis on Infinite Earths was a story that was needed, and they had the best artist at his peak at the time to get it done.
And to do that type of story, because you needed a guy that could draw all those characters. Now, can you put up the picture, the cover of all the villains of the Crisis one? Look at Lex Luthor. Oh my God, I loved that cover. You never saw DC characters like that. I have to say, that's like done in the Marvel style, and it's just, I never saw that before for the DC characters and stuff. It just looked so good. Look at that. I love Lex Luthor painting. That is a guy that loves what he does, and he will draw every little inch of that, and it's clear, it's concise, it's comic-y, and it's cosmic. I love it.
Yes.
Absolutely.
And I would have to say, I can't imagine any other artist being able to pull that off at that time.
No. It needed to be him. And the panel of Superman, the pre-Crisis Superman punching that asteroid when he swings and he's that panel when he punches it and that explosion, what a panel. Oh my God. Unbelievable. Now I'm going to throw one of my first things at you, Steve, too. It was Fantastic Four 167. That was the actual first comic. Now I didn't know this is the second part to the episode, but there was a kid up the street from me. He was a lot older than me, and in his garage, I remember we were up there. He had like the better bikes. He must have been like 5 or maybe 10 years older than me and my brother. but he had like we had the Huffies, but he had like the Hutches and the Mongooses. Oh, I mean, and it was just, so we would go to his house, and I remember looking at his garage because we were at the side of his house and in the garage, and I saw these stacks of comic books, and those colors, there's something so electric about them. And I remember looking, and right on the top is I saw issue 167, but the cover, the top of the cover was cut off. He might have got, when they used to do the returns, that you would cut off the cover. He had stacks of them. I didn't know that at the time, but I remember the Hulk and the Thing fighting on the what is that called? The Missouri
Isn't it the St. Louis Arch?
Yeah, the St. Louis Arch. And it's just in my brain. And the kid Kenny, I asked him, I go, what is that? He goes, oh yeah, that's my comic collection. My father gets them, blah, 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 blah. And I said, can I see that one? He said, no.
Oh.
He wouldn't even let me look at it. So that stupid issue stuck in my head for years. And I was so young. You couldn't go to a comic store. There was no comic stores. I couldn't drive. Everything was in your 1 mile radius where you could ride your bike. You know what I mean?
You wouldn't have been able to remember the issue number anyway.
I didn't know the issue number because it was cut off too. Yeah. But so now to fast forward to about a few years ago, Roy is going to we're going to Missouri, we're going to his college. He's going to be alumni. They're going to be filming him and all that stuff. And we're both driving in the car, and we're passing that St. Louis Arch. And then Roy looks at me and he goes, I had the Hulk fight the Thing on that. And I said, I know, Roy, I know that cover so much. It drives me crazy. I wanted to know so much more about that. And I didn't know the St. Louis Arch, all that stuff. But another thing of me being tied to Roy in some crazy way, but him just saying that, and it just went right back to that asshole who wouldn't let me look at that comic book. It still hurts. But George Perez was there. Now, years later, looking at that issue, how good! Looking at the 166, but the 167. There's a panel of the Hulk ripping up all this freaking chunk. Oh my God! This was such a crazy issue because the Hulk wasn't fighting the Thing; he was teaming up with the Thing, and he was fighting against the Fantastic Four. And with Joe Sinnott, look at that art. That is what you call comic book art at its finest. This is where Neil Adams was a realism guy for a photographic mind. You want to draw comic art, like solid comic art without the abstract of Kirby. Kirby was all power action, but it was abstract, But solid comic art, you go to George Perez, you look at that stuff, and that's how you do it. That is a timeless. And the ending of 166, the issue, as I got educated, and I'm like, oh my God, there's an issue before this where they're fighting. Look at that cliffhanger. Two things. This is 166, I think that's Rich Buckler who's doing the art on that cover. But the last page of the Hulk and Thing standing there, and they're about to fight the Fantastic Four. I just wish I was a little kid or reading that for the first time. Could you imagine reading that cliffhanger for the first time? Like, what a story. Roy Thomas, people don't know how good he really was. And then you throw that art with Roy. Quentin Tarantino, I have to throw this. Quentin Tarantino said Roy's comic book Conan run is the greatest comic book run in the history of comics. Look what it did for that guy. Because Roy got it. He just got it. And then you give him an artist like George Perez or John Buscema, and they take comics so far to the stratosphere. That's why the 60s and 70s will be the be-all or end-all of comics. So, George Perez, love you, man. Kenny, I don't know where you are, but now, I don't care. I know I have a few of those issues.
Yes. And again, for those of you who are super nerds and really know your stuff, there's a little sequence in that issue which I thought was fantastic. And again, George Perez does such a great job of catching expressions on characters' faces. And there's a little sequence where Reed has a plan to take out the Hulk.
I didn't want to talk about it, Steve, because it hurts me. It hurts. I knew you were going to talk.
So, so basically, they're having this fight, and then Reed tells him what to do. So he basically has the Human Torch burn all the oxygen away around the Hulk, and then Sue puts this force field around his head before he can take a breath. So the Hulk's, he's like this, and yes, he's the strongest guy on Earth. He's 7 foot. He's 1,000 pounds of unfettered fury, but he needs to breathe.
1,040 pounds, Steve. 1,040 pounds.
So the Hulk is lifting his head, and George Perez, he's like this. And then Reed says to Ben, hit him. And Ben's just off to the side, and he's like, what? And Reed's like, I can't hold him anymore. Hit him. And then Ben's like, that's like, you know, shooting a fish in a gallery or something like that. And so finally he goes, hit him. And the thing just goes, bang! Knocks him out.
Knocks him out. Clean out.
Sequence, it's a magical sequence. And again, just for those guys, you know, hopefully for spoilers who haven't read it, okay? But if you get out there and get it, that issue. Yeah, again.
Notice I didn't want to say it at all. I tried to totally skip that. Steve
kills me. Of George Perez doing these great little tiny panels, okay? That wouldn't have been done that way with a Kirby or even a John Buscema. But the way Perez, you know, focused on it, and you saw the thing's little face, and, you know, and he's, you know, then the Hulk's little face, and he's struggling. Beautiful work. One, you've got Roy Thomas.
And the Thing
Perez.
Didn't want to do it. He felt bad.
Want to do it. And
that's why
it leads, of course, into the next issue where you see the Hulk put up like this, and the government's coming in, the army, and then the Thing's like, no, I don't like this, and then frees the Hulk, and then you have that issue, and they go off. But that issue, that little panel where the Hulk is lifting that concrete, that's because the army and the soldiers have come there again, and the Thing's like, hey, don't throw it down there, and the Hulk's like, don't tell Hulk what to do. So the Thing actually has to smash it with his hand out. Needless to say, what makes George so special, and I know that anyone who's a George Perez fan will appreciate what I'm about to say. He would draw these small little panels with very clear lines. But when he had to do a scene of dynamic action, like a power beam, lasers, rockets, it was, you know, he obviously got his ruler out and he drew it. You could feel the power on the page. He was the best at drawing laser shots ever. Okay. Better than Jack, better than John, better than anyone. His shots where people are firing lasers. Just take a look at Project Pegasus if you really want to get into it.
Which Steve, this perfectly leads into why was he picked to do the DC Avengers Justice League crossover? But the first one, Niall, if you go to the first, that came later. If you go to the first where they're just squaring off, it never came to be. That one right there, that was supposed to be that. It was going to be written by Perez doing the art, and what was it, Conway first, and then Roy was going to do it. He was coming, and it met all problems, and it never happened. But who's the best guy for the job?
Well, basically, there was only one guy. I don't think any other artist would have accepted that. They would have called up George, or the editor would have said, "Oh, Rob Liefeld, we have a job for you. We want you to do this." He would have immediately called up George Perez and say, "George, why aren't you on this book?" Okay, he would have. He would have called, and George would have called up anyone at DC and said, "Did you just offer that book to someone else?"
Oh God!
No one would have dared do it. It took 20 years.
Yeah,
and we, right here, all three of us, right now, we can give thanks that George got to do the project, his dream project. He got to do it. Kurt Busiek was the writer, of course. At that time, he was as hot as blazes after his Avengers run. But George finally got to get that monkey off his back. 20 years of waiting, huge story. He got to do it. So I think he would have been more tortured if he had got sick and was passing and he had never got to do that project.
Yeah.
I really do.
Mm.
I think after he did that project, he could sit back and say, the 12-year-old me who was dreaming of doing that book, I had a little bite of the apple in 83. And then in 2003, I finished it off.
Yeah.
And that story will live forever.
Ever.
It filled his spirit with satisfaction.
Yeah.
And wherever he went, wherever he was going to a convention, people are bringing him up and saying, oh, I wasn't ever a DC fan, but I love this book, and vice versa. Oh, I was never a Marvel fan, but I love this book, George. Can you sign it for me? That's how I feel about that book.
Yeah, and as I told you before, now you don't know this, but I collected comics religiously from 83 all the way without a break to 2003. And the last issue I ever got was that was a 4-issue limited series.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Issue number 3, I stopped. I could not live with the fact.
Oh God!
See, now I'm gonna fanboy. Sorry, George. I'm gonna take a little sidebar here. When Superman beat Thor, I said, enough. John Cimino, I did not get the 4th issue, and I stopped. Now, Niall, you have to understand how big my collection is. I had the Marvel run of everything. Amazing Fantasy 15, all the way. Avengers #1, all the way. Hulk #1 of the first 6, all the way. Defenders, all the way. Everything. Marvel Tales, Marvel Supervillains. It was insane. When that hit me, I said, I'm done. And I left. But so once again, I saw George Perez in that barber shop like this, where the barber kept pushing my head back. And then the last thing I ever collected, the last book I ever bought off the shelf, I've never bought a comic since, when the Superman standing over Thor, which was brilliantly done, brilliant art, because you think about how much he had to pack in those issues. But when Superman beat him, George Perez was the last comic I ever got off the rack.
Well, of course,
that's
you're
incredible.
going to have to lay the blame there on Kurt Busiek. George is just drawing. So I remember the same thing myself when I read it. And, I think I'm a bigger Thor fan than you are, John. You're a bigger Hulk fan than me. But when it comes to Thor, there's very few people in this world that can even approach my ridiculous magnitude of ridiculousness.
Wait, Niall, just so you know, with the Hulk, I'm suicidal. With Thor, I'm nearly suicidal. Okay, go ahead.
I remember when I read that, and I remember I put the book down for a second, and then Superman stands up and says, that's the toughest fight I've ever had in my life. And I was thinking, and I kept looking at it again, and I read the same sequence, and I was just like, I don't know what to do. So I wasn't quite as voracious in the fury. I did read issue 4. But anyway, that being said, for George to get that out of his system, to do all that work, a labor of love, we can thank our lucky stars that the stars aligned for that moment. It was done. And of course, they just recently came out with that special reprint of like the hardcover, so that other people can look at it again. Because
that was from the Hero Initiative, right? The Heroes Initiative.
Because it was out of print for forever. Again, what we're forgetting right now, we fast forwarded George's other Marvel magnificence. Now, remember, he went to DC in 1980. He came back to Marvel in 1990. You may not be aware of it, but the first cover that he did in 1990 was Mighty Mouse. Okay? Did a cover of Mighty Mouse.
Oh, really?
Yes. So if you want to take I don't know what issue it was, but I remember reading in an interview, that's what he said. He goes, yeah, I came back to Marvel and I was expecting all these big things, and the first cover I did was Mighty Mouse. So at this time, you know, we had this whole new audience of people who had grown up, and now they were Todd McFarlane, Rob Liefeld fans, Jim Lee fans. And suddenly, George Perez wasn't quite on the hot burner list anymore. So George basically was like, oh, wait a minute. You know, there's a famous story where a young fan came up to him and basically said, you know, hey, you know, you're almost as good as Todd McFarlane, whatever it was, if I remember correctly. And George Perez was sort of like, oh, my God. He went through that period where he wasn't doing a lot of work. Okay, he did some stuff for Malibu. He did Ultra Force. He did some stuff like that.
Prime, yeah, I remember that.
Yeah. But basically, he had been gone from the limelight. Then we get Infinity Gauntlet.
Yeah.
Wow.
A masterpiece.
Unbelievable. So not only did he do Crisis on Infinite Earths, he gets Infinity Gauntlet. Massive story. Now, the thing is that DC also gave him War of the Gods. The poor guy, he's drawing 65 hours a day.
Yeah.
So he only got to issue 4. Then it switches over to Ron Lim, and he does the inking. But again, there's these panels, these pages with all these little panels, all this power. And so Jim Starlin is asking, you know, George, when he's doing a script, you need to showcase an amazing amount of power in this page. George Perez, right place, right time, biggest book of the year.
Yep.
Okay. Biggest book of the year. And that's saying something because in 1991, you had X-Men #1 from Jim Lee.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's crazy.
But this Infinity Gauntlet was the book of the year. And I remember reading it and I was like, oh my God, that's George Perez. He's back at Marvel. This is fantastic. It's truly sensational. And a whole new audience of people come along looking at that little credit box going, oh, George Perez. Oh, I wonder if he's a new guy. So yes, you can bet your bottom dollar that when he was at his conventions, someone's either going to be bringing an issue of Crisis, maybe an issue of the FF, maybe an issue of the Avengers, like issue 141, maybe, okay, which is his first Avengers issue. And then they're going to put Infinity Gauntlet down in front of him, okay? Or then, of course, you know, Avengers JLA. That's what he probably signed for year after year after year. So he completely reinvigorated the Cosmic line with Jim Starlin. And again, we can look at that book because it's reprinted every month.
Yeah, I know.
Whatever hardcover it is, whatever it is, millions of people, millions of fans get to see his beautiful work over at Marvel after a 10-year hiatus.
Yeah, and I know you jumped over it, but just to throw out there, because we don't have time to talk about everything the man did, but, you know, he redefined Wonder Woman. Like, he redefined her. Oh, my God. He totally redefined her.
Mm-hmm.
And
no one wanted to draw Wonder Woman after him, by the way.
No. And
didn't want to do it.
Gal Gadot, all that Wonder Woman, that movie was all based on her look, on the look that Perez did with Wonder Woman. Right there. Let's not forget the fact that he went back with Kurt Busiek, and they went to they did the Avengers Volume 2, and then the great storyline of Ultron Unlimited. Remember they had those 4 issues where Thor goes, Ultron, I'll have a word with thee, and all that stuff. So he came back like with I was always so happy to see Perez because I could always gravitate to his art, and that's the kind of storytelling and art I always loved. So in essence, what this video is about, this episode's about, you know, we can go on and on about the comics. We can go on and on about the things that define us. But once again, George, as good as a man as he is with his art, like, the guy is one of those true royal legends. And to lose him and Neil Adams literally like a week apart is truly like epic. But I said it like I said at Neil's. They left their mark on the world, and that's what an artist wants to do. Leave something that's bigger than them, because you know if he could go back, he would do it all over again, and he was happy. That's the thing. Neil was happy because he left his mark. Kirby was happy. You know, Ditko was happy. Stan Lee was happy. God forbid, all these other guys, they left their mark that impressed us and that made us want to change. So, in ending, Niall, you got anything to say? Any last words we can give to Mr. Perez and things you want to talk about?
I'd have to say for me, man, Perez, I am a DC guy. I think it's just from the era that I was from. And in Crisis, man, when I first saw those, because I was, a baby when those first came out. But when I saw the back issues in there, those covers really caught me, right? And I got especially, Superman holding Supergirl. I mean, it's like seeing two Titans like that. That doesn't make sense. Why are we in this scenario? What is going on? And my neighbor, we bought the every issue that there was, and we went through and we read them, and that for me, that was actually the first George Perez moment for me, was Crisis. And then from there I explored more and more DC, and then Infinity Gauntlet came. And again, you want to talk about some great lasers. I mean, just like the whole cosmic universe in that book, Steve, is unbelievable. But I'm getting goosebumps because it's just I love, after that, man, I like George Perez. To me, it was huge. Yeah, McFarlane and them are huge, this and that. But to me, man, I was still following George Perez. Still, Jim Starlin, like those guys all still mattered, right? But the impact they had, I mean, it's lasting longer. I mean, the movies reinvigorated it. People are exploring them. That's why they're getting reprinted, because more and more people are catching up. Kids are getting older. They're watching these movies. They do want to know more, and they're getting into the back issues, which is great. Not necessarily new stuff, but again, it's sad. It's like an end of an era, but he left his mark, and we'll have it forever. He will live on forever. And he will inspire forever. He's inspired me. He'll inspire the next generations. He's inspired you guys. I mean, it's just, he gave his gift. He came into it with a smile. And like you said, if you follow him on social media, from what we gather, he left with a smile.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said, Niall. I mean, once again, these are the people that defined our life, and they changed pop culture. I mean, it's just that they're just that important. And nobody ever had anything bad to say about George.
No.
That can't be said by a lot of other guys. George is almost like 100% was like, he's the man. He was such good to work with, and he was a fan, and he loved it, and he appreciated what he did. So I can't say anything more. Steve, why don't you get us out of here? What do you got? Some last words?
Yes. I when I think about George and the struggle that he had those last couple of years, of course, he had a problem with his eyes. And then, of course, he had the, diabetes, and he was dealing with the cancer. I don't know whether I've ever said this on the podcasts before, but when John Buscema died, I was extremely distraught. And I remember one night I went to sleep, and then I had this dream, and it was clear as crystal. And I'm looking at a table, and John's got his head down, and he's drawing, and he raises his head, and he just said, "I'm okay. I'm okay." And he carries on drawing. When I woke up in the morning, all that angst had gone. Okay, now look, I'm not an overly religious person, but I'm just saying, when I woke up in the morning, I was like, he's drawing again. He's drawing again. So I equate that right now in my mind that George Perez, he's on the other side. He's got his eyes. He's back to what he was. He's drawing. He's there. And he's like, "Hey, John, hey, do you want to come over and take a look what I'm doing?" And George's like, "Wow, And then John's like, "Hey, wow, look at you." That's the way that I can get past the sadness. He was in a tremendous amount of pain. It's not fair. It wasn't fair that such a good man had to deal with that much pain. So for me, internally, I imagine him. He's there. He's drawing. His eyes good. He's got stamina. He can draw for 29 hours in a row. He can just keep drawing. Okay? That's how I want to think of George, because that's, that his heaven is drawing again and again and again.
And
that's
hey,
what he's doing right now.
Steve, and he's passing his pencils to Joe Sinnott and Sinnott's inking.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, because that was his best inker. And so
Yes.
he's passing it. He's passing it to Joe, and Joe's picking up right there. Hell,
Yes.
Joe Sinnott was everybody, who was another great man too.
Yes.
Oh my God.
Oh yeah.
So everybody, I suggest if you want to read a still fresh issue of George Perez, I'm telling you, pick up Fantastic Four 176. That's a great standalone issue that it's so entertaining, you'll love it. That's complete genius right there. And then obviously Crisis on Infinite Earths, Infinity Gauntlet, it goes on and on and on. So
And
we
also,
hope that...
also, we're forgetting something very special from George.
Go ahead.
You've got to read Creatures on the Loose, Man Wolf, okay? Read it. And also Marvel Premiere issues 45 and 46 featuring Star God, okay? Written by David Anthony Kraft, and the best version of Man Wolf you will ever see. Do it!
Hey, you heard it from Steve. So we'd like to thank everybody. Niall, always, Pop XP, Billy Tucci in spirit, Roy Thomas in spirit. Little moment of silence now for one of the true royal legends, Mr. George Perez. Thank you, everybody. And we'll see you next episode.
Hey everyone, thank you for joining us on Pop XP. If you haven't already, make sure to click that subscribe button and also click the bell for notifications when we go live and we upload some awesome new content. Also, don't forget to head on over to Twitter and follow us at the Pop XP and over on Instagram at the Pop XP. Thanks again everyone, and we'll see you soon.